You are standing at the edge of something you cannot see the end of. The wagon behind you holds everything your family owns: flour, salt pork, a cast iron skillet your mother carried from Illinois wrapped in her wedding quilt. There is a list in your coat pocket, written in your own hand, of every pound of food you are carrying. You have memorized it. You know it is not enough. There is a man at this fort who wants to send you a different way. He says it will save 300 miles. He says the road is good. He says you will reach California before October, before the mountains close, before the first snow falls on the passes. He is not making this journey. He wrote a book about it. The wagon wheel has a crack in the rim. The left rear ox has been limping for 2 days. Your youngest brother has not held down a full meal in a week. You have counted the flour sacks. You have counted the days. The numbers do not agree with each other. The other wagons in your party are making a decision tonight. The men are talking by the fire. Your father is among them. You are not invited to the conversation, but you have heard every word through the canvas wall of the wagon, lying still, pretending to sleep. Someone says the shortcut is worth the risk. Someone says Hastings himself has gone ahead to clear the road. Someone says California. You know that word. You have held it in your mind every mile since Missouri. Every river crossing, every broken axle, every night lying in the dark listening to the oxen breathe. California, green valleys, rain, a new life, everything that made leaving possible. But you know the flour count. You know it better than your father does. You are the one who measures it. You are the one who writes it down. 300 miles saved. But what if the road is not what he promised? You will be deep inside a mountain range you have never seen when you find out the answer. The fire is burning low outside. The men are still talking. A decision is being made right now, tonight, in the summer dark. That will determine whether you see California this year or not at all. You do not sleep. This is quiet history at bedtime, and if this is your kind of story, a subscribe means everything right now. Every detail in this story comes from the historical record. Just relax and feel free to let this play as you drift off to sleep. Now, let us begin. Your name is Sarah Holt. You are 20 years old. You were born in Sangamon County, Illinois in 1826, the eldest child of Thomas and Margaret Holt, and you have lived your entire life within 30 miles of the same creek your father fished as a boy. Until this year. Your father heard about California the way most men heard about it, in pieces through newspaper articles and pamphlets and the talk of neighbors who had already packed and gone. The Mexican government had ceded the territory. The land was fertile. The climate was mild. A family could stake a claim on more acres than a man could walk in a day. Your father read everything he could find, and in the winter of 1845 he made his decision, and by spring of 1846 the decision was made for all of you. You are the eldest child. Your mother, Margaret, is 38 years old. Your brother, James, is 14. Your brother William is 9 years old and has been coughing since the Platte River crossing. A dry, persistent cough that does not worsen but does not resolve, and his face is thinner than it was when you left. Your father assigned you the food stores. He did this because you are precise, because you keep figures, because you are the one who noticed, back in April, that the cornmeal sack had a loose seam and 20 pounds of meal had sifted out onto the wagon floor before anyone caught it. You tied the seam yourself with waxed thread. You weighed what remained. You wrote it down. You have been writing things down ever since. Your ledger is a small notebook, cloth-covered, purchased at a dry goods store in Independence, Missouri, in early May. Every ounce of food that enters or leaves your wagon passes through your accounting. Flour, cornmeal, dried beans, salt pork, bacon, coffee, sugar, hardtack biscuits, dried fruit, the quantities at departure, the quantities consumed each week, the quantities remaining. The standard emigrant guidance that circulated before departure recommended 200 pounds of flour per adult for the full overland journey to California. Families typically brought additional supplies proportional to the number of children, the expected length of the journey, and the degree to which the party intended to supplement by hunting. Your family of 5 started with 870 pounds of flour. You checked this figure against 3 different printed guides. You wrote it in the first page of the ledger in large letters, the way you write things that serve as reference points. It is now July 27th, 1846. You are at Fort Bridger. The journey from Independence, Missouri to this point is just over 1,000 miles. You left on the 12th of May, 11 weeks ago, following a route that hundreds of emigrant parties have taken over the previous several years. From Independence, you moved west across Missouri and into the Kansas prairie. You followed the Platte River for weeks, the slow brown river that runs so flat and wide through the Nebraska territory that it seems less like a river and more like a continent deciding to become water. You crossed the Platte at a ford that cost you 2 full days of waiting for other parties to clear the crossing. You climbed gradually into the high plains. You passed Fort Laramie, where you resupplied coffee and salt at prices that made your father's jaw tighten. You climbed through the South Pass of the Rocky Mountains in late June, the pass so gradual that you crossed the Continental Divide without knowing exactly when you had done it. You came down into the high desert country. You have been on this road for 11 weeks, and the road has changed you in ways you are aware of but have not fully catalogued. Your hands are different. The palms are calloused in places that correspond to the work of trail life. The heel of each hand from driving the oxen with the reins, the inside of your fingers from rope work, the right thumb from the clasp of the ledger. You notice these calluses not with complaint, but with the factual attention you bring to all observations. They are information. They tell you what this journey costs. Fort Bridger itself is not what the name implies. It is not a military installation. It is a small trading post established 3 years ago by James Bridger, a mountain man and fur trapper who has spent more time in this western country than almost any living American, and his partner Luis Vasquez. The physical plant is modest, a collection of rough log buildings, a trading room stocked with goods at prices that reflect the distance from any competing supplier, several corrals of weathered timber, and a forge where a smith can address the animal and mechanical needs of passing emigrant parties. The surrounding country is beautiful in a spare way. High meadows and sage flats ringed by mountains, still carrying snow on their upper elevations even in July. The sky here is the enormous sky of the high west, the kind of sky that makes you understand for the first time why people talk about the size of the country. Because the country is not just wide, it is tall, and you are inside it. There are perhaps 20 wagons camped near the fort when you arrive. Some are heading for Oregon, some for California. All of them are paused, resting animals, mending equipment, resupplying at the fort's prices, making decisions. You have been here 2 days. Tomorrow morning, the party decides which road to take west. The established road runs north from Fort Bridger to Fort Hall on the Snake River, then turns southwest to join the Humboldt River and follow it west across the Nevada Basin to California. This is the road that emigrants have been using since the early 1840s. It is longer by perhaps 300 miles when measured against the alternative, but it is known. Its water sources are mapped by men who have traveled it multiple times. Its distances are reliable. Its dangers are understood and therefore, in some sense, manageable. The alternative is the Hastings Cutoff. Lansford Warren Hastings is a lawyer from Ohio who traveled overland to California in 1842 and returned by sea in 1845. He is 25 years old. In 1845, he published a guidebook titled The Emigrant's Guide to Oregon and California, in which he described a more southerly route that cut southeast from Fort Bridger through the Wasatch Mountains, across the Great Salt Lake Desert, and west through the Nevada Basin to rejoin the California Trail near the Humboldt River. In his book, Hastings wrote that this route saved approximately 350 miles compared to the Fort Hall Road. He described the Great Salt Lake Desert crossing as roughly 40 waterless miles, manageable in a day and a half with proper preparation. He described the Wasatch Mountains as difficult but passable for wagons. Hastings had never actually taken this route with wagons when he wrote those descriptions. He had ridden it once on horseback. You are not certain your father knows this. The book is widely read and widely trusted, and the men who quote from it do not typically note the distinction between a man who has walked a road and a man who has ridden past it once on a horse. What you know for certain is that Hastings came through Fort Bridger earlier this summer. He left a letter at the fort for emigrant parties following behind him, urging them to take his cutoff and promising that he would personally guide them through the difficult sections if they could catch up to him. He wrote this letter and then he went ahead. He went ahead instead of waiting. You have turned this fact over in your mind for 2 days. The families most persuaded by the cutoff are the ones traveling in the largest, best-supplied wagons. The Donner family, led by 62-year-old George Donner, a successful farmer from Springfield, Illinois, is traveling in 2 wagons with his wife Tamzine and their 5 daughters, a full crew of hired hands, and supplies that visibly exceed the standard emigrant recommendation. Tamzine Donner is a small, precise, educated woman who keeps a botanical journal and presses specimens between its pages. She asked you, when you first camped near each other at the fort, whether you had seen any lupine along the road since Fort Laramie. You had. You told her where. The Reed family travels in what the emigrant community has taken to calling the Pioneer Palace, a custom-built wagon with an elevated sleeping compartment and a small iron stove installed in the floor. James Reed is a furniture manufacturer, compact and self-assured, a man who speaks in declaratives. His certainty about the cutoff is absolute, and it is the kind of certainty that does not invite the consideration of alternatives. Your father has been spending his evenings at Reed's fire. You have watched this with the attention you bring to developments that affect your accounting. Your father is a good man. He is not a foolish man. But he is a man who responds to confidence the way many men respond to confidence, as though it were evidence. Reed's certainty reads to your father as knowledge, and your father, who knows what he does not know about this Western country, is filling in that uncertainty with Reed's supplied conviction. 2 nights ago you calculated what the cutoff would mean if it is what Hastings describes. If the route is genuinely 300 miles shorter, your flour supply margin actually improves. You arrive with more food, not less. The arithmetic makes the cutoff look like the sensible choice when it is presented that way. But the arithmetic assumes the route is what Hastings says it is, and you cannot verify that from here. Tonight you sit in the wagon with the ledger open and the small oil lamp burning, and you run your finger down the flour column one more time. 870 pounds at departure, 412 pounds consumed, 458 pounds remaining. The Fort Hall route, 900 miles, approximately 9 weeks of travel. Flour enough for 11 weeks with a modest margin. The Hastings Cutoff, 600 miles if Hastings is right, 7 weeks of travel. Flour enough with a larger margin if Hastings is right. The question is always the same question. If Hastings is right. You close the ledger. Your mother is at the rear of the wagon with her mending in her lap, not sewing it, just holding it, looking at the canvas wall. James is asleep already, one arm thrown over his eyes. William is warm tonight, the low-grade fever that comes and goes, having chosen tonight to be low, and his breathing in sleep is easier than it has been. Your father is still outside. You hear him and Reed talking in the way men talk when the decision has already been made and the conversation is the ritual of confirming it. You know your father's voice in every register, the register of doubt and the register of resolve, and what you hear through the canvas is resolve. He comes to the wagon a few minutes later. He climbs in without lighting the lamp. He settles into his place. He lies still for a moment. Then, quietly, so as not to wake James and William, we go with the Donners in the morning. You do not answer. You already knew. You lie on your side and look at the canvas wall and listen to your family breathe around you. The fire outside goes cold. The oxen shift in the corral. Somewhere across the camp, a child cries once and is quieted. The stars over Fort Bridger are very bright and very far away. You have 458 pounds of flour. The short road begins at dawn. You think about Illinois, not with longing exactly, with a kind of precision. You think about the kitchen in Sangamon County in December, the smell of the fire, the particular brown of the fields seen through the window when everything was harvested and the land was resting. You think about how the horizon in Illinois is always 30 miles away, and always flat and always familiar, and how you have spent 11 weeks in a country where the horizon is either too far or too close and is never the horizon you grew up looking at. You are 20 years old, and you are on the other side of the Rocky Mountains, and in the morning you are going the short way. You do not sleep for a long time. When you do sleep, It is the shallow sleep of someone listening even in sleep, monitoring, accounting. The wagon canvas moves slightly in the night wind. The oxen breathe in the corral. The sky begins to lighten before you are ready for it. And then the day begins. You have thought, in the months since your father first brought the pamphlets home, about what it means to leave a place. It is not the same as losing a place. Losing would imply the place was taken. What you did was put on your coat and walk out the door and close it behind you. The door is still there. The house is still there. Someone else will live in it, or no one will, and either way the county road will still run past it, and the creek will still run where it runs, and the fields will still be fields. Leaving is a choice. That is the part that makes it complicated to think about, especially at night, especially in a wagon at the edge of a desert with the calculations not quite working out. Your father chose this. Your mother agreed to his choosing. You did not choose it in the same way, because at 20 you go where your family goes, but you chose to come fully, to apply your full self to it, to take the ledger and the pencil and the careful attention and bring all of that to bear on making the choice work. That is the closest you can come to choosing something that was chosen for you. Tonight you are at Fort Bridger with 458 pounds of flour and a decision your father has just made that you believe may be wrong, and what you are choosing is how to carry that. You could speak. You could say, tonight, in the dark of the wagon, that the numbers only work if Hastings is right, and Hastings may not be right, and the Fort Hall Road is longer, but it is known. And known is worth something that no calculation can fully quantify. You could say this, but your father has said we go with the Donners, and his voice had the quality of resolve that is past the point of argument, and the argument, even if you made it, would not change the morning. You have seen this before, on the road. The moment when a decision is made and the making of it is final, not because it is right, but because the person who made it needs it to be final in order to keep moving. Moving forward is the whole enterprise out here. Everything depends on it. So you do not speak. You lie in the dark, and you hold the thing you know, and you let the night pass. And in the morning you will get up and check the flour and check the oxen and do what needs to be done next. This is not resignation. This is the specific form of courage that the road asks of the people who carry the accounting, the people who know the numbers and know what the numbers mean, and who must, sometimes, carry that knowledge without putting it down anywhere that others will trip over it. You are 20 years old, and you have been carrying it since Fort Laramie. One more night is not the weight that breaks you. The canvas lightens before you are ready. The camp sounds begin. Fire smoke, cattle, a child's voice somewhere. Your mother stirs, James moves and goes still again, buying a few more minutes of warmth before the morning requires him. You are already awake. You have been awake for an hour, running the numbers one more time in the dark. The same numbers, the same result, the same question at the end of them. If Hastings is right. You put the ledger in your coat pocket and climb down from the wagon into the cold morning air. The short road begins today. The morning is cold for July. You are awake before the camp, which has become your custom on this road. You rise in the gray before sunrise and pull on your coat and your boots without making noise, and you climb down from the wagon into air that carries the cold of high elevation even in midsummer, the cold that does not belong to any season but to altitude alone. The camp at Fort Bridger is mostly still. A few cook fires from last night hold faint coals. Two women are already working at a fire across the clearing, not speaking. You nod to one of them, Mrs. Caseberg, a German woman with a round face and careful eyes, whose husband Ludwig is not a man the other men seem to find easy. She nods back. You go to your own fire and build it from coals with dry grass and small sticks from James's bundle. You set the pot on. Coffee. Your coffee supply is lower than you would like, but this morning you decide it is warranted. Some mornings are coffee mornings and some mornings are not, and you have developed, over 11 weeks on the trail, a reliable sense of which is which. While the water heats you, open your ledger and write the date. July 28th, 1846, Fort Bridger. Departure day. You write the full inventory beneath it. This takes perhaps 10 minutes. The entries have a rhythm to them by now. The same columns, the same order, the numbers transcribed from yesterday's running total to today's clean record. This is how you start every travel day. The figures first. The day ordered before the day begins its work. Flour, 458 pounds. Cornmeal, 61 pounds. Dried beans, 40 pounds. Bacon and salt pork, 112 pounds. Sugar, 28 pounds. Coffee, 14 pounds. Hardtack, 22 pounds. Dried fruit, 18 pounds. Salt, 9 pounds. You look at the numbers. Then you close the ledger and pour your coffee. The party assembles over the following 2 hours. It takes time. Getting 23 wagons and the people belonging to them organized and moving requires a collective effort of coordination that no one person directs, but that happens through the accumulated habits of groups who have been doing this for months. Fires are doused. Animals are fed and hitched. Children are loaded. Gear is stowed. The sequence is always the same, so that it has become, even for the children, something they perform without instruction. The party taking the Hastings Cutoff numbers approximately 87 people across 23 wagons. The Donner Reed group forms the core of it, plus the Graves family, who joined at Fort Bridger, and several additional families and single men who have decided for various reasons to take the shorter road. Some of them heard Hastings speak at the fort last year. Some of them made the calculation you made and believed it. Some of them are simply following the largest, best-equipped group, on the reasonable theory that safety in numbers is its own kind of argument. You move out at mid-morning, which is later than you would prefer. The first miles of the Hastings Cutoff run southwest from Fort Bridger across open country, sage-covered and rolling, the Uinta Mountains visible to the southeast and the Bear River Range to the north. The sky is clear. The road is passable. The oxen are rested. You walk beside the wagon. Most women ride on the wagon seat or inside the wagon bed. The seats are not comfortable, but they require less energy than walking, and by this point in the journey, most of the women have settled into a pattern that conserves what the trail demands. You have always preferred to walk. Walking lets you see the ground. Walking lets you hear the oxen. Walking gives you information that riding does not. Your left rear ox, the one you privately call Limper, for the slight favoring of his left front leg that has been present since the Platte River crossing, moves with his usual uneven gait. He is not worsening. He is not improving. He is a fact you check each morning and note and file. The first day out from Fort Bridger covers 11 miles. This is below your usual pace, but not alarmingly so for the first day with a large party. When the coordination inefficiencies of a newly organized group cost time that will improve as the days progress, you note the mileage and note the date. The second day is 12 miles. The country is still open, the road is clear, and there is a creek with good water where you noon. The third day brings you to the mouth of the Weber Canyon. This is the route Hastings described in his book for crossing the Wasatch Mountains. Weber Canyon is a gorge cut deep and narrow by the Weber River, a geological slot of rock walls and river bottom that a man on horseback could navigate and a mule could thread, but that presents immediately, to anyone looking at it from the entrance, an obvious impossibility for loaded wagons. The walls are vertical in places. The river runs through the canyon floor in a channel of boulders. The width of the passage varies between passable and impassable, with no clear pattern that a wagon wheel could predict. Someone finds a note wedged in a split stick at the canyon entrance. The note is from Hastings. It is written in a hand that you have come to associate, from his book and his earlier letter, with the slightly elevated language of a man who believes he is making history. The note says, in essence, that Weber Canyon has proven more difficult than anticipated, that parties following should not attempt to take it, that he has gone ahead with another group by a different way, and that someone should come find him and he will come back to lead you through by the alternative route. You read this note twice. Then you look at the canyon. Then you look at the note. Then you look at the canyon again. James Reed organizes the response with the efficiency of a man accustomed to managing situations. He and two other men, Charles Stanton and William Pike, ride forward on horseback to find Hastings and bring him back to guide the party. They are gone for 2 full days, during which the party camps at the canyon entrance and the men discuss their options and the women maintain the camps, and you sit with your ledger and calculate what 2 stationary days at full food consumption means for your margins. When Reed returns, he comes back without Hastings. He found him. Hastings is many miles ahead with the first group, already committed to his alternative way, and he declined to return. What he did instead was ride with Reed to a high ridge above the canyon and point out, from a considerable distance, a route through the mountains to the south of Weber Canyon. He pointed at it from a ridge. He did not descend into it. He did not walk its terrain or assess its water sources or measure its gradients against the capacity of loaded wagons. He pointed. Reed has done his best to sketch the indicated route from what he could see from the ridge. He spreads the sketch on the wagon tailgate, and the men study it. The sketch shows mountains. It shows a direction. It is not a map. There is nothing to do but try it. The party leaves the Weber Canyon entrance on approximately the 1st of August and turns south into the Wasatch Mountains by way of the route Reed sketched from Hastings Pointing. What you find is not a road. It is not a trail. It is not a path worn by previous travelers. It is wilderness in the full sense of the word. Dense stands of aspen and Engelmann fir, ravines cutting across the slope at irregular intervals, boulders deposited by old glacial action in configurations that seem designed to stop wagons, and gradients that rise steeply for 100 yards and then drop into a ravine and rise again. To pass 23 wagons through this, you must first build a road. This means felling trees with axes. It means moving boulders using chains looped around them and teams of oxen pulling sideways. It means filling the ravines with cut timber and packed earth until the surface can hold a wagon wheel. It means winching wagons up gradients too steep for animals to pull, using ropes attached to trees and every available pair of hands on the rope. Your father swings an axe for 10 hours on the first day. James, 14 years old, swings an axe beside him. You cook and carry water and tend William, and at the end of each day, write one number in your ledger under the column you have labeled miles. Day 1, 1.5 miles. You write this and look at it. The Wasatch Crossing is 36 miles, measured from the canyon entrance to the Salt Lake Valley on the other side. At 1.5 miles per day, the crossing will require 24 days. You have food for approximately 77 days at current consumption. The 24 days of crossing will consume those days of food at the standard daily rate, while producing almost no forward progress toward California. You do not show your father this calculation. You make a deliberate choice about this. Your father needs his strength. He needs to believe that the work in front of him today is worth doing, and it is worth doing. It is absolutely worth doing, because there is no alternative. Showing him a calculation that he cannot act on, in a situation that cannot be changed, accomplishes nothing except the removal of the strength he needs. You put the ledger in your coat pocket and go to help with the ropes. The days in the Wasatch accumulate in the manner of days that all resemble each other but are each, in small ways, worse than the day before. The second day produces 2 miles. The third day produces 1 mile because it rains in the night and the ground becomes heavy mud, and 2 wagons must be freed from it by every man and chain in the party, which takes most of a morning. Your hands suffer from the rope work. You tear a strip from a spare petticoat and wrap your palms over the raw places, which helps until the fabric works loose in the damp. On the 8th morning, you wake to find Limper lying down. He is not dead. He is exhausted, and his leg has worsened in the demands of the mountain terrain. Your father and 2 neighboring men examine him. The conclusion is that he can still pull on level ground, but cannot be used on the steep sections, which means he must be unharnessed and led separately on the bad pitches and his share of the load distributed among the other 3. You watch the other 3 oxen with close attention over the following days to assess what this redistribution costs them. You note what you see. The party emerges from the Wasatch Mountains 36 miles after entering them. 21 days have passed since you left the canyon entrance. You sit at the western edge of the mountains and look out at what lies beyond. The Great Salt Lake Desert. It extends from the base of the mountains to the horizon without interruption, a flat, pale surface of salt crust and dried alkaline mud that catches the afternoon sun and throws it back as a kind of diffuse white light, almost luminous, the flatness so complete that the curvature of the earth is visible in it if you look for long enough. It is an extraordinary landscape. It is also, completely and absolutely, without water. Hastings' book described the desert crossing as 40 miles. He said it could be done in a day and a half. Men in your party have heard reports from other travelers that the crossing is closer to 80 miles. The discrepancy between 40 miles and 80 miles is not a rounding error. It is the difference between a manageable crossing and a crossing that kills animals. You stand at the mountain's edge and look at the white plain in the late afternoon light. Your father comes to stand beside you. He is thinner than he was at Fort Bridger, which is thinner than he was at Fort Laramie, which is thinner than he was in Illinois. The trail does not add to people. It subtracts from them, a slow, continuous subtraction of weight and ease and the baseline confidence that comes from being in a place you understand. He looks at the desert and does not say anything. You look at the desert and do not say anything. Then he goes back to check the wagon, and you go to refill every water container you own from the last creek before the desert begins. You have 4 wooden barrels, 2 canvas water bags, every pot and canteen your family owns. You fill them all. You calculate how long this water will sustain 4 oxen and 5 people at rationed consumption rates if the crossing takes 3 days instead of 1.5. You note the figure and close the ledger. The camp that night is at the desert's edge. The salt flat takes the last sunlight and holds it longer than the mountains do, turning from white to pale gold to a faint rose as the sun drops. You have seen many beautiful things on this road. The Platte River braided through its valley, the South Pass at dawn, the high meadow country around Fort Bridger. The desert before you is objectively beautiful in the same way. You watch it become dark. The crossing begins tomorrow night, when the temperature has dropped enough to reduce water loss in both animals and people. You will move through the dark and rest through the heat of the day. You write in your ledger before you sleep. August 23rd, 1846. You left Fort Bridger 26 days ago. You are 21 days behind the schedule you calculated at the fort. The desert is still ahead. You wake on the desert's edge in the middle of the night, not from noise, but from a quality of silence that wakes you sometimes on this road, when something has shifted. You lie still and listen. Nothing is wrong. The camp is still. The oxen are quiet. The canvas overhead is dark, but you are awake now, and the desert is right there, just beyond the tailgate, its flatness pressing against the edge of the camp like a held breath, and you know that in a few hours you will be inside it, and the knowing is enough to keep you sitting up in the dark for a while. You take out your ledger and open it. Though you cannot read it in the darkness, just hold it. This has become a habit you have not examined, the way some people hold a rosary or a letter from home. You hold your ledger. It has the weight of something that has been used continuously for months. The covers soft from handling, the binding slightly swollen where water got into it during the Platte crossing, and you dried it page by page over the fire. The Platte crossing feels like a long time ago. You are not the same person who crossed the Platte. This is not an emotional observation. It is a practical one. You know things now that you did not know in Missouri. You know how to check an ox's leg for the localized heat that precedes a worse injury. You know how to read the color of desert water and whether it is safe for animals. You know the way a wagon sounds when a wheel bearing needs grease versus when a wheel hub is beginning to fracture, which are two completely different sounds that you learn to distinguish by listening carefully over many miles. You know which of your flour sacks tends to attract moisture and must be checked first after rain. You know how to make a fire in wind and how to preserve a coal overnight in ash. None of this is in the guidebooks. The guidebooks tell you what to bring. They tell you roughly how far it is between water sources. They tell you in the language of men who made the journey once and then wrote about it, what to expect. But what to expect and what you actually encounter have a relationship that the books do not fully convey. The gap between those two things is where the actual journey lives. Lansford Hastings wrote a book. He described routes and distances. He gave you a framework that made the journey seem mappable, calculable, a thing of known distances and manageable stages. You are sitting in the dark on the edge of a desert that he said is 40 miles and that your party believes is 80. About to enter it with animals and people who are already depleted, and you are holding a ledger that cannot tell you what is actually on the other side of the equation you are walking into. The numbers in the ledger are real. The numbers in Hastings' book may not be. This distinction is the one that has been keeping you awake since Fort Bridger. You put the ledger back in your coat pocket and lie down again and close your eyes. The oxen breathe in the dark. Your mother makes a small sound in her sleep and settles. James shifts and goes still. William's breathing is slow and even beside your mother, the good kind of slow, sleep rather than fever. You have 458 pounds of flour. You have 4 oxen, one of whom limps. You are about to cross a desert. Everything is exactly as true as it has been all day. Lying in the dark does not change the numbers and does not change the desert and does not change what tomorrow holds. The only thing lying in the dark does is give the mind time to hold everything at once without having to act on it. Sometimes that is enough. You close your eyes and breathe the dry desert air that carries the mineral smell of the salt flat 100 yards away, and you wait for sleep to come back, and eventually it does. The camp begins to stir before dawn. The routine of departure has its rhythm by now. The same sequence performed in the same order by people who have done it enough times that it requires no direction. Fires are lit, water is heated. The animals are checked and watered from the barrels, a measured ration, not more. Food is cooked and eaten quickly, standing because this morning there is not time to sit. Your father checks every water seal on every container twice before the wagon moves. He presses the barrel staves and tests the canvas bag seams and rocks the pots to hear the water level. He is not a man who talks about fear. He is a man who checks the water barrels twice. You check the oxen. Limper is stiff in the early morning cold, but moves to his position in the team without resistance. The other 3 are steady. You watch them take their places in the harness with close attention, knowing that what you see right now is the starting condition of something that will test all of you. The desert waits at the edge of the camp. It has been waiting all night. You leave at dusk, the way the desert demands. The party crosses together, all 23 wagons, as close to together as the dark and the terrain will allow. The logic is basic. If someone loses an animal in the night, they need help close enough to reach them. You have been doing this long enough to know that the logic is correct, and also that in practice, over the miles of a desert crossing in the dark, a group of 23 wagons becomes several smaller groups, becomes individuals in the dark, and no amount of planning fully prevents this. The first hour of the crossing is almost encouraging. The salt crust is firm under the wagon wheels. The surface holds. The oxen move steadily. You allow yourself, briefly, a measured kind of hope. Perhaps this is what Hastings said it was. Perhaps 40 miles. Perhaps a day and a half. Perhaps you have already suffered through the worst of the detour, and what remains is merely long. Then the surface changes. Beneath the salt crust, which varies in thickness from a finger's breadth to a full foot, is mud, soft, gray, alkaline mud that has been sitting undisturbed under its salt lid for years, and when the weight of a wagon wheel breaks through the crust, the wheel sinks into this mud with a sucking sound, and the oxen must lunge forward to free it. This happens without pattern. The surface looks the same everywhere, white and flat and deceptive, and you cannot tell where the crust is thick enough to hold and where it is not until the wheel breaks through and tells you. You walk beside the wagon with a lantern held low, watching the ground ahead of the lead oxen. You call out when the surface ahead looks soft or discolored. Your father drives. James walks the far side, doing the same work. Your mother rides inside with William, whose cough has returned in the cold night air of the desert, the dry hacking that you hear and track the way you track everything, as data, as information about the system you are responsible for keeping alive. The stars above the salt desert are unreasonable in their density. With no trees to interrupt the horizon and no smoke from fires and no moisture in the air to scatter the light, the sky at night over the Great Salt Lake Desert holds more stars than you have seen in your entire previous life combined. They blur in places into bands of light rather than distinct points. You would find this beautiful in a way that required stopping and looking, but you are watching the ground and listening to the oxen and monitoring the water level in the barrels and tracking the cadence of your family's breathing. You file the sky away as something you saw. You keep walking. By midnight, the party has spread across perhaps 3 miles of the desert. The lanterns of the wagons ahead and behind create a string of lights that floats above the salt flat in a way that makes distance impossible to judge. The flat seems to absorb depth the way it absorbs sound, returning everything as a kind of uniform remoteness. You cannot tell if the nearest lantern ahead is 100 yards or a quarter mile. There is no way to measure. You stop twice before dawn to rest the oxen. At each stop, you check the water barrels. You give the animals their ration from a bucket, watching them drink with the focused attention you bring to anything that cannot be replaced. Limper drinks well. The other 3 are quieter than you would prefer, standing with their heads low between rest and motion, a posture that says endurance rather than health. At dawn, you have covered perhaps 15 miles. You make a camp without a campsite. You extend canvas from the side of the wagon to create shade, and you and William and your mother crawl beneath it. The sun comes up over the salt flat and becomes immediately significant. The heat is dry and extractive. You can feel it drawing moisture from your skin with a directness that humid summer heat in Illinois never had. You wake after a few hours with a headache and a mouth coated in something faintly chemical, the alkaline residue that the air carries in fine suspension. You check the water barrels when you wake. More has been used than you calculated. Limper struggled on one of the rough sections in the night, and your father made the correct decision to give him extra water, which is correct for Limper and expensive for your margin. You revise your estimate of how far the remaining water carries you, and note the revised figure. The second night is harder. The crust in the central section of the desert is thinner, and the mud beneath is softer, and the wagon breaks through regularly now, sometimes every 20 or 30 yards, each breakthrough requiring a lunge from the oxen that costs them effort they are not getting back. You hear shouting from somewhere ahead in the dark. Another family's wagon stuck, the sound of chains and animals and men working. You keep moving. You cannot afford to stop. Sometime in the deep middle of the second night, the Reed family loses their oxen. You hear it before you understand it. A sudden concentrated commotion from behind. Men's voices raised and then cutting off. And then a quality of silence that means something has gone wrong in a way that cannot be immediately fixed. The Reed oxen, perhaps smelling water somewhere at the far edge of the desert, or perhaps simply maddened by thirst in the way that cattle can become maddened when thirst becomes critical, broke their traces and ran. Hired men from the Reed wagon went after them on horseback in the dark. Most of the oxen were recovered by morning. 2 were not found until the following day, miles from the road. One of those 2 did not survive. You note this in your ledger under a heading you have titled Party Conditions. Not your loss, but information. What happens to one wagon on this crossing tells you something about what can happen to any wagon. The third morning brings the far edge of the desert. Hastings said 40 miles. The party's estimate, comparing days traveled against pace, is close to 80. The crossing that was supposed to take a day and a half took 3 days and 2 nights, during which you rationed water severely in the final stretch, fed your animals less than they needed, and consumed food at your standard daily rate, while making progress that Hastings' book made sound like nothing at all. You stand at the eastern edge of the desert and look back at it from the other side. It is beautiful from here too. The salt surface in morning light breaks into small, bright flickers, pale gold and white, a surface that has no concern for what crossed it or what it cost them. You turn west. The terrain ahead is scrub desert, low sage and dry washes, the mountains of Nevada rising in the distance. The Humboldt River is somewhere beyond those mountains, the river that the main California Trail follows west. When you reach the Humboldt, you reach a known road. You reach a road that other parties have been on for weeks. The tally at the morning camp is sobering. Your party came through the desert with 4 oxen intact, which puts you among the fortunate. The Reed family has lost 1 ox permanently from the desert crossing and must redistribute load among fewer animals. The Graves family has lost 2. Several other parties have lost animals they cannot replace. An elderly Belgian man named Hardkoop, who had been traveling with the Keseberg wagon, completed the last portion of the desert crossing on foot after the Kesebergs determined they could not carry extra weight. Hardkoop sits near your fire that morning. He is 60 years old, and his feet are blistered in a way that makes walking forward look like an act of pure decision separated from physical capacity. You give him coffee. He speaks almost no English. and you speak no Flemish. He holds the cup with both hands and looks at you over the rim with the expression of someone who has received something they did not expect to receive. You look back at him with the expression you have developed for this kind of moment on this road. The expression that means, I see you, and I have nothing more to give, and I am sorry for both of those things. The party moves out by mid-morning. The weeks following the desert crossing fall into a rhythm that is not a comfortable rhythm, but is at least a rhythm. You cross the salt flats east of the Ruby Mountains, and then enter the mountains through a gap that leads northwest toward the Humboldt. The terrain is alkaline and dry, the water sources intermittent and often bitter, but you are moving, and movement has its own argument. The oxen are thinner than they were at Fort Bridger. You can see it in their hip bones, which protrude more than they should, and in the way they stand at the start of each day, slower to warm into their work. An ox in good condition on this road needs approximately 30 pounds of dry forage per day. What you are finding them in the Nevada basin, dry sage and intermittent patches of buffalo grass, is not 30 pounds. You supplement from your supply when you can, which is an expense your ledger notes with precision. On the last day of August, your party reaches the Humboldt River. The Humboldt is not an impressive river. It is narrow and slow and brown, running through a flat valley with willows and cottonwoods along its banks. The kind of river that in Illinois would be considered a creek, but it has grass along its banks, and the grass is the best grazing your oxen have had since before Fort Bridger. And when you make camp on its bank and watch your animals put their heads down and eat without lifting them for an hour, you feel something in your chest release that you did not know you had been holding. William's fever breaks on the first night at the Humboldt. He eats a full bowl of cornmeal porridge in the morning and asks James to show him the card trick they have been working on since Missouri. You watch this from across the fire, and you allow yourself several minutes of sitting still and doing nothing except watching your brothers do something pointless and ordinary. It is, specifically, a relief. The Humboldt River Road runs westward for approximately 350 miles before the river disappears into the desert at a place called the Humboldt Sink. The road is established, and its water sources are the river itself, which makes navigation straightforward, but the river grows increasingly alkaline as you travel west, and you learn to watch its color and smell for the sections where it is too bitter for the animals and where you must use the barrels instead. The days have their pattern. You move in the mornings. You noon near water. You move again in the afternoon. You camp. You tend the animals. You cook. You write in the ledger. You sleep, and then you do it again. On a day in early September that you mark in your ledger with a horizontal line rather than words, one of your healthy oxen drinks from a stretch of the river before you can redirect him. He is sick the following morning, weak in his hindquarters, stumbling when he tries to move at any pace. You watch him through the day. He does not improve. His name in James's accounting is Duke. He has been Duke since May. He has pulled your family's wagon across Missouri and Kansas and Nebraska and Wyoming and into Nevada, and he has done it without distinction, which is the highest compliment you can give to an animal whose job is to be steady. On the third day after he drank the alkaline water, Duke cannot keep pace with the wagon. Your father makes the decision. You lead Duke to the side of the road and unhitch him and leave him there. You do not look back. You have learned, over the months on this road, that looking back at things you have left is a useless kind of pain that changes nothing about the leaving. 3 oxen. 3 oxen can pull a loaded wagon. The margin is gone, but the capacity is not gone, not yet. What is gone is the tolerance for any additional loss, and what is required is a reduction in the wagon's load to compensate for the reduced pulling capacity of the team. Your father has not raised this yet. You are going to have to raise it. The conversation happens that evening, quietly, with James sent to help another family with their fire. Your mother listens with the stillness of someone who has been preparing for a thing, and who, when it arrives, does not require time to absorb it. Your father listens with more resistance that settles as you lay out the reasoning, not dramatically, just clearly, the way you present all calculations. In the morning, your mother's rocking chair stands beside the Humboldt River road in the sage. It is a good chair. It came with her from her father's house. It was the thing she chose to keep when other things were being left in the mountains. And now it stands in the Nevada desert, with the patience that chairs have everywhere, with no opinion about being left, simply present and then behind you. Your mother does not speak that day, but she does not cry, and you have learned on this road to count that as strength. The river is lower now as September progresses. The valley narrows. The road is rougher. The mountains to the north and south close in around the corridor of the river valley. The days are getting shorter in a way that matters to someone tracking usable travel hours, the column of daylight in your ledger growing smaller one day at a time. You sit by the fire in the evenings and do your figures. It is the middle of September. You have been on the road since May. The Sierra Nevada, the final mountain range between you and California, can be crossed through the high passes until the first heavy snowfall, which typically comes to the Sierra in October or November, though some years it comes earlier, and no one, from any book or any man who has traveled the road, will tell you which kind of year this will be. You close your ledger. The fire is low. Your family is asleep. The Humboldt River makes a small, continuous sound in the dark, moving west the way you are moving west, slower every day, running toward the place where it ends. The days after Duke's death have a different quality than the days before it. It is not grief exactly. Duke was an ox, not a person. And the road has long since clarified the difference between things that are grievable and things that are simply losses to be accounted and moved past. What changes after Duke is the margin. With 3 oxen instead of 4, every decision about load and pace and terrain becomes a decision about the limit you are approaching, rather than the limit you are within. You watch the 3 remaining oxen with close attention. You know their individual characteristics now the way you know the characteristics of everything you manage closely, their patterns, their tolerances, their signals. Limper's signals are the most legible, the weight shift, the hesitation on steep ground, the way he drinks when he is hurting versus when he is simply tired. The other 2 are newer to your reading. Their messages subtler, and you spend the post-Duke days learning to read them more carefully. Your father understands the situation without being told. He has reduced the wagon's load already, the chair and the tools and the bolts of fabric already gone, and now he goes through what remains and removes additional weight with the methodical attention of a man solving a practical problem, rather than making sacrifices, some of the cast iron cooking equipment, a spare set of harness fittings that were brought as insurance and that have not been needed, a wooden crate of household goods that your mother had packed with what she considered essential and which your father now opens and goes through item by item, setting things aside without comment. Your mother watches this with a deep stillness. She does not speak while he works. When he is finished and the items are arranged beside the road and he closes the wagon tailgate, she turns back to the fire and begins preparing the evening meal. This is, you understand, a form of agreement. This is the road making clear what it requires, and your mother choosing to keep moving rather than to stop over what the road has required. You note the weight reduction in your ledger as an improvement to the oxen's load. This is the correct way to record it. The Humboldt River Road continues its westward course through the second half of September, the valley narrowing as the mountains close around it. The road itself deteriorates as you travel west, the earlier sections having been better maintained by the season's traffic, the western portions rougher and less worn. You encounter several dry sections where the river vanishes underground for miles before reappearing, and these sections require using the barrels again. The barrels are lower than you would prefer. On the 18th of September, you reach a point on the Humboldt where the road passes through a narrow defile between low rocky ridges. It is a passage that requires wagons to go single file and that concentrates the party into a line rather than the loose spread that open country allows. The party ahead of you has cleared the defile by the time you reach it. The party behind you is still some distance back. You are, for a stretch of perhaps 3 miles, moving through the narrow passage with no party immediately ahead or behind. Just your family's wagon in the rocky corridor, with the river close on one side and the ridge close on the other. This is the first time you have been effectively alone since Fort Bridger. It is a strange feeling after weeks of continuous company. The wagon sounds are the same, the creak and rattle and the oxen's breathing, but without the surrounding noise of 20 other wagons and their animals and people. You become aware of sounds you have not been hearing distinctly: the river over its stones, the wind through a gap in the ridge, the sound of your own boots on the road. You walk beside the wagon as you always do, and you listen to the country. It is objectively empty country. The Nevada Basin in September is scrub and rock and alkaline dust, the kind of landscape that has its own austere character but that makes no effort to present itself as hospitable. The mountains to the north are brown. The sky is enormous and cloudless. There is no indication in any direction that humans have been here before except the road you are on. You have been on this road for approximately 19 weeks. You have traveled approximately 2,000 miles. You have 3 oxen and 4 weeks of food, and the Sierra Nevada is somewhere ahead. In the defile, for those 3 miles of temporary solitude, you let yourself hold all of these facts simultaneously without managing them. Just the facts, undressed of calculation. You walked away from Illinois, and you have been walking ever since, and the walking has cost things that cannot be put back, and has brought you here to this narrow place in the Nevada desert in September, with California still ahead, and the calendar beginning to press. Then the defile opens, and the wagon ahead is visible again, and the wagon behind appears, and the road broadens back into the familiar width of a party in motion, and you pick up your accounting where you left it. The ledger is in your pocket. The numbers wait. You keep walking west, The arrows come at dusk. You are walking beside the wagon on the south side of the road when you hear the disturbance, not quite a sound at first, more a change in the quality of the air, and then a shout from the front of the column and the crack of a rifle, and the column stops. The Paiute people have lived in the Great Basin for centuries before any emigrant road existed. They know this country in the manner of people whose survival has depended on knowing it for generations. Every water source and every seasonal shift, every corridor through the mountains, and every place where game concentrates. The Humboldt Valley is their territory. Immigrant trains have been traveling through it for years, disrupting game patterns, grazing out the grass along the river, consuming the resources that the Paiute depend on, and the relationship between the emigrant parties and the people whose land they are crossing is not simple and has never been simple. Some parties have traded peacefully along the Humboldt. Some have had livestock stolen in the night. Some have had direct confrontations in which people on both sides were hurt or killed. The pattern in 1846, as in other years, is that conflict is most likely in the western stretches of the Humboldt, where the valley narrows and the resources thin, and the pressure of many people and animals passing through the same corridor becomes most acute. You learn all of this context afterward, in retrospect, talking with other travelers. In the moment, what you know is that arrows have come from the west bank of the river, that one man's mule has been hit and is screaming, and that your father has your arm and is pulling you toward the rear of the wagon while telling James to get down. You lie flat on the ground beside the wagon wheel and press your face into the dry grass. The shouting continues. More rifles. Then silence. Then a longer silence. Nobody in your immediate party is hit. The mule is badly wounded and must be put down, which its owner does within the hour, his face showing a grief you have seen on men's faces at various points on this road. The grief of a necessary thing that costs something beyond what the necessity justifies. 2 oxen in another wagon are arrow-struck, but not mortally. The decision is made to move immediately rather than camp, to put distance between the party and this location before dark. You walk for 2 more hours in the gathering dark, with your hand on the side of the wagon, to keep from losing it in the blackness. James walks close enough that you can hear him breathing. He has not said a word since the arrows came, and you do not say anything to him, because some things do not become smaller when you speak them, and some things need time before they can be spoken at all. After this, the party travels more carefully. Guards post at night. People stay close to camp. The freedom you had in the earlier weeks of the journey, the ability to walk ahead of the wagons and think in the relative quiet before the column caught up, is gone. You stay close. You reach the Humboldt Sink in the 2nd week of September. The sink is what happens when a river runs out of river. The Humboldt does not meet another waterway or reach the ocean. It runs into a flat, marshy depression in the desert, where it spreads into shallow pools and evaporates into the alkaline sky. The grass at the sink is rank and yellow, and the water is undrinkable, and the air has a mineral stillness, the smell of old water going nowhere. Every party on this road has described the Humboldt Sink as the place that feels most like an ending before the road continues. You understand this when you reach it. From the sink, the route crosses the 40-mile desert to reach the Truckee River. This is not the same desert as the Great Salt Lake crossing. The Salt Desert was alien and pale. The 40-mile desert is brown and volcanic, cut with dry gullies, floored with cracked earth and loose rock. It is 40 miles without water, which at your current pace means roughly a day and a half to 2 days of travel if the animals hold. Your animals are not in the condition they were when you crossed the salt desert. They are thinner and they are tired with a tiredness that rest does not fully address, the tiredness of animals that have been working past their reserves for weeks. You spend a full day at the last good water before the sink. You rest the 3 remaining oxen on the best grass you can find and fill every container you own. Your father trades 2 pounds of coffee to the Graves family for a spare water barrel they have been using as a wagon seat. You note the trade, 2 pounds of coffee for 1 barrel. You calculate what the barrel holds and how long that water lasts, 3 oxen and 5 people at rationed consumption. You note the figure and do not say it aloud. The desert crossing begins at dusk, the same reasoning as before. The cooler temperatures preserving water in people and animals, and making the distance feel less absolute than it does in the heat of the day. The 40-mile desert is not kind to any of these calculations. The road runs across baked earth and old volcanic rock, corrugated with wagon ruts so deep and hardened by sun that your wheels drop into them and must be lifted clear. The dust is a fine alkaline powder that coats your throat and stings your eyes. You wrap a cloth across your face and breathe through it, and within the hour the cloth has absorbed the sweat from your face, and the alkaline dust has bonded to the moisture, and your face is a layer of salt and gray powder. You walk. Walking through the 40-mile desert at night, with the wagon ahead and your family inside it and the stars above and the alkaline dust in everything, you think about the ledger, not the current numbers but the first entry, the neat, large figures you wrote on the first page in Independence. 870 pounds, a number that felt like security when you wrote it. A number that was a promise the road has been spending down ever since. You walk and let that thought go where it goes, and keep your eyes on the ground and keep moving. By midday of the second day you see the cottonwood trees. Cottonwood trees along a western river have a look you can recognize from a distance, a line of green interrupting the brown. A vertical brightness that registers in the eye before the mind has processed it. You see the cottonwoods of the Truckee River from several miles out. You do not speak. You touch your father's arm and point, and he sees, and the oxen seem to understand something in the way animals understand the nearness of water, and they move with marginally more purpose. The Truckee River is cold. It comes down from the Sierra Nevada carrying snowmelt, and it is cold enough that your hands go numb in it within a minute. You fill the water barrels first, both of you and James, filling and passing and filling. Then you let the oxen drink. Then you drink yourself, and the cold of it in your dry throat is one of the finest physical sensations you have known in months. You camp at the Truckee River for 3 days. This is longer than anyone planned, but the animals need it, and your father makes the call, and no one argues, because everyone can see the state of things. You use the time with the care you bring to everything. You wash what can be washed. You mend the tears in the canvas that have been accumulating since the Wasatch. You check every bolt and pin and fitting on the wagon. You bake extra hardtack, The plain flour and water crackers that keep almost indefinitely and that deliver more caloric value per carried pound than anything else in your stores. On the second day at the river, you take a full inventory. Flour, 198 pounds. Cornmeal, 22 pounds. Dried beans, 15 pounds. Bacon and salt pork, 44 pounds. Sugar, 9 pounds. Coffee, 8 pounds. Hardtack, 31 pounds, including fresh baked. Dried fruit, 4 pounds. Salt, 6 pounds. You look at these numbers carefully. You left Fort Bridger with 458 pounds of flour. You have 198 pounds remaining, which means you have consumed 260 pounds in approximately 7 weeks since Fort Bridger. That is roughly 37 pounds per week. At this rate, your remaining 198 pounds will last approximately 5.5 weeks, or roughly 38 days. The journey remaining from the Truckee River to the California settlements is approximately 150 miles. Most of it passes through the Sierra Nevada. Under normal conditions, with healthy animals and clear passes, this might take 3 weeks. You do not have normal conditions. You do not have fully healthy animals. What you have is the 19th of September, 1846. The Sierra Nevada high passes sit at roughly 7,000 feet. The passes can receive snowfall that makes them impassable starting in October in poor years and November in average years. You have approximately 5.5 weeks of food. The mountains are 2 days ahead of you. You sit with this information by the river while your family sleeps. Downstream, one of the Donner fires is still burning, and you can see Tamzine Donner's shape beside it. She keeps a journal as you do, though her journal is for recording the world she passes through, rather than the quantities of what she carries through it. You wonder sometimes what she writes in it. You wonder if the two kinds of record, the botanical and the caloric, add up to something like a full account of where a person has been. The river makes its cold sound beside you. It came down from the mountains you are about to climb. It does not know what month it is. It does not know what the passes look like. It simply runs, carrying the snow from above down to the desert below, doing what rivers do without reference to anyone's schedule. Your father comes and sits beside you without speaking. He has developed over these months the economy of motion that long, hard work teaches, who does not move without reason and does not speak without something to say. He looks at the fire for a while. Then, what do the numbers say? You have been expecting this question. You have been deciding for days how to answer it. We have enough, you say, if we move quickly. He is quiet for a moment. He has known you for 20 years. He knows the difference between what you say and what you are not saying. How quickly, he says. No more stops after this. We have to be over the pass before the end of October. He nods. He gets up and goes back to the wagon. You sit with the river for a while longer. The Sierra Nevada is a darkness in the west where the stars end and something solid begins. You cannot see the mountains at this hour, but you can feel the place where the sky stops being sky. 6 weeks of food, the mountains just ahead. You have made harder calculations, you tell yourself. You are not certain this is true. But you tell yourself this, and in the morning you will get up and check the oxen and write the date in your ledger and start walking west. That is what there is to do. You close the ledger. The river runs. Tomorrow you begin the mountains. The 22nd of September arrives by the river with the same indifference that all dates have arrived since Missouri. The date does not know what it means, only you know what it means. You have 5.5 weeks of food. The pass closes in October in bad years and November in good ones. You break camp before dawn. The Sierra Nevada Canyon begins gently, which you have learned to distrust about geography. Things that begin gently on this road tend to reveal their true character over time, and the true character is usually harder than the beginning implied. The Truckee River runs cold and clear beside the road, the sound of it constant, a sound that is both company and reminder that the water in this canyon came from the high places you are climbing toward. The canyon walls are granite, pale and massive, streaked with the dark lines of water that ran down them in spring. Ponderosa pines grow from cracks in the rock where enough soil has accumulated to hold them, their roots working into the stone with the patient insistence of things that have all the time in the world. You do not have all the time in the world. The grade steepens on the third day in the canyon. You feel it first in your legs, then hear it in the sound of the oxen's breathing, then see it in the angle of the road, which tilts up with a purposefulness that the earlier miles lacked. This is the mountain beginning to take the road seriously. This is where the journey announces that it has requirements beyond what the flat country required. Your father drives, you and James walk. Walking in this grade means leaning forward slightly to compensate for the slope, a continuous small adjustment that becomes the new normal within a few hours, and that you know your body is making without your full attention. Limper struggles on the steepest pitches. You have been managing this since the Wasatch. You unhitch him from his position before the worst grades and lead him separately, redistributing his portion of the load to the other three. This system works. It costs time and it costs the other 3 oxen, but it preserves Limper's usefulness on the stretches where he is able. And preserving animals is what you are doing now instead of preserving miles. The trees thin as you climb and the sky opens and the views expand in a way that the canyon below did not permit. You can see the ridges above you now, the granite faces catching sun at angles that make them bright against the blue sky. And somewhere above those ridges is the pass. On the morning of the 6th of October, it snows. A few hours of small dry flakes that melt before they reach the ground in the lower elevations, but dust the upper branches of the fir trees and the rock faces above the tree line with a faint white that says, "I am here, I am early, I am not yet serious, but I am here." Your father watches the snow with the expression of a man registering information he would prefer not to have received. Your mother comes to stand beside him, and he puts his arm across her shoulders in the way he rarely does in front of others. James holds out his palm and catches snowflakes and watches them melt. He is 14. He knows what snow in the mountains in October means in the abstract. He does not yet know it the way you know it, as a number in a column, as a boundary on a calculation. You let him catch snowflakes. William watches from the wagon seat, wrapped in the heavy blanket, and asks whether there will be more. You tell him probably yes, in the mountains in October. He considers this and then asks whether California has snow. You tell him the valleys do not, only the mountains, and the mountains are behind you once you cross. He nods as if this is a satisfactory arrangement and pulls the blanket tighter. The snow of the 6th of October melts by noon. The mountain looks as it did before, but the message has been received, and the camp that evening is quieter than camps have been recently. The fires maintained later into the night, and the conversations shorter. You write in your ledger by firelight. October 6th, 1846. Light snowfall, cleared by noon. Current elevation approximately 5,800 feet. Estimated distance to Truckee Pass, 12 miles. 3 oxen, 5 people. Current food stores: flour, 198 pounds. Beans, 15 pounds. Bacon, 44 pounds. Hardtack, 31 pounds. You close the ledger and look at the fire for a while. The mountains above you are dark against the stars. The peaks where the snow was visible all day, now invisible in the night. Just a presence where the stars stop. The cold at this elevation is real cold now. Not the chilly nights of the desert, but mountain cold with weight to it. The cold that gets through fabric if the fabric is not sufficient. You pull your coat closer and watch the fire, and let your mind run the same calculation it has been running since the Truckee River, the same variables adjusted for today's numbers. 12 miles to the pass, 3 oxen, 198 pounds of flour. The pass is still ahead. The fire burns low, and you let it. The meeting on October 1st settles nothing, and everyone goes to bed having moved slightly farther toward their respective positions. Reed pushes forward. Donner argues for rest. The other men divide between them or remain silent, which is itself a kind of vote. Your father watches and listens and goes back to the wagon wheel he was greasing before the meeting started. You watch this and think about the decisions being made and the decisions not being made and the difference between them. A decision not made is still a decision. Deciding not to press the pace is a decision to arrive later. Deciding not to discuss the food stores openly is a decision to manage the knowledge by restricting it. Deciding to let the argument between Reed and Donner play out rather than intervening is a decision to allow the friction to continue. You are aware of all of these non-decisions the way you are aware of the ledger's blank spaces as information. What you cannot do is make the decisions for them. You are 20 years old and you are a woman and you manage the food stores, which is a significant responsibility, but not an authority that extends to the camp's general conduct. The men listen to you when you report on the food. They listen with the attention of people who know that the information is real and important. But when the conversation moves from the state of the food to the pace of the party, the conversation moves to a different register, the register where your voice is heard but not weighted the same way. You have made peace with this in the specific way that people make peace with fixed conditions, not by accepting it as right, but by working within it as effectively as the fixed condition permits. What you can do is tell your father what you know. What you can do is be ready to act on whatever decision emerges. What you can do is keep the ledger accurate so that when the information is finally needed, the information is there. You do all of these things. The days after the meeting are the climbing days. The road from Alder Creek toward the summit gains elevation steadily, the forest changing character as you climb, the ponderosa giving way to lodgepole pine, and then to the sparse, high-altitude fir that grows where the growing season is short. The trees at this elevation have a wind-shaped quality, their branches heavier on the downwind side, the upwind side more sparse, as if the mountain is always telling the trees which way the winter comes from. Your father tells you one evening that the oxen are at the limit. He says it quietly, sitting at the fire, looking at them where they are tethered. He does not say what this means for the future. He says it as an observation, the way you say things that are true and that need to be spoken aloud, even when speaking them changes nothing. How far to the pass, you ask? 5 miles, maybe 6. You sit with this for a moment. 5 or 6 miles at the current pace, with the current grade, with oxen at their limit, will take 2 to 3 days. 2 to 3 days is a long time with the clouds building from the west. You look at the sky over the trees. The cloud layer is thickening from the west with a steadiness that has a different character from the usual afternoon cloud buildup. It is moving in rather than building up. There is moisture in the air now in a way there was not this morning. You look at your father. "We go early tomorrow," you say. He nods. The fire burns low. The mountains wait above you in the dark. The Sierra Nevada begins before you are ready for it. This is not how mountains work in your experience. The hills of Illinois rise gradually from the flat, politely, giving you time to adjust. The Sierra does not do this. The Truckee River Canyon cuts directly into the mountain's eastern face, and the grade rises sharply within the first miles, the walls closing in, the cottonwoods giving way to pine and fir, and then to denser forest, the air cooling with an abruptness that makes you pull your coat closed. It is the 22nd of September. You had planned to rest one more day at the river. Your father made the decision at dawn to move instead, looking at the sky with an expression you have learned to read, and you agreed without saying so, and the camp was struck and the wagons loaded in the efficient silence of people who have stopped needing to be asked. The canyon road is rough. The Truckee River runs beside it, sometimes below, sometimes at the same level, always audible. Always cold. The road crosses the river multiple times, shallow fords that your wagon manages without incident, the water white and fast over the rocks. You watch the oxen at each crossing. They are moving well today, better than yesterday, the 3 days' rest having done its work. Limper is sound on flat ground. On the steep sections, he struggles. You note this and file it. The trees here are enormous. Ponderosa pine with bark the color of cinnamon and the texture of puzzle pieces. Fir trees so tall their tops are not visible from the road level. Aspen groves turning gold at the edges of their leaves. This is the first time since Missouri that you have been surrounded by forest, and despite everything, despite the numbers and the oxen and the season, you feel something loosen in you in the presence of the big trees. The air smells of pine resin and cold water and something else, a high, sharp smell that you will later identify as altitude, though you do not have a name for it now. On the 3rd day in the canyon, you pass a party coming the other direction. This is unusual. The emigrant road runs one way, everyone west, and a party moving east in late September is either heading back to the settlements for supplies or is the advance of a relief expedition or is some other category of situation that requires inquiry. Your father pulls alongside their lead wagon. They are a small group, 4 men and 2 women, traveling light with mules. They crossed the Sierra 2 weeks ago, they say, coming from California. The pass was clear. The weather was holding. One of the men looks at your oxen. He looks at the date, or rather, he asks the date, and when your father tells him, he looks at the sky. He says something then that you do not hear clearly because you are on the far side of the wagon, but you see your father's face when he hears it, and you can read your father's face. When you ask your father later what the man said, he tells you the man thought the season was late, but the pass was still possible if you didn't stop. You believe this is a partial version of what the man said. You do not press. By the end of the first week in the Sierra, your party has climbed from roughly 4,000 feet at the Truckee River to approximately 6,000 feet, following the river canyon upward. The air at 6,000 feet is noticeably thinner than at the desert floor, and the oxen feel it. Their breathing is heavier on the steep grades, a laboring sound that carries. The forest is thicker here, and the road is shadowed through most of the day. You pass through meadows where the grass is brown and dry, past this year's best grazing season, and then back into the trees. The temperature drops sharply at night. You wake some mornings with frost on the canvas, which you brush off with your coat sleeve, and which is gone by mid-morning, but which represents a change in the season that you track with the same care you give to all measurements. October 1st arrives while you are camped at a meadow the men call Alder Creek, roughly midway through the Sierra portion of the road. You write the date with a particular deliberateness. October, the 1st of October. You have run out of summer. The party holds a meeting at this camp, the men standing in a circle near the Donner wagon while the women do not stand in the circle but are close enough to hear. The question on the table is pace. Everyone understands that the pace must increase. The question is whether the current condition of the animals permits the increase, or whether pushing them harder now will cost more than it saves. James Reed argues for pushing forward immediately. He is, you have come to understand, a man who believes that problems yield to will, that the application of sufficient determination makes physical realities negotiable. He has been wrong about several things on this journey, and he continues to hold his views with unchanged confidence, which is a quality you have observed but not fully understood. George Donner argues for rest. His animals are among the worst in the party. He is 62 years old, and the journey has taken a visible toll on him. A grayness around the mouth, a slowness in his movements that you did not see at Fort Bridger. Your father does not argue. He listens to both, and then he goes back to your wagon and begins greasing the wheel hubs, which is what he does when he has made a decision but does not feel the need to announce it. You leave before the argument is resolved. The days that follow are the hardest of the journey, not because anything goes catastrophically wrong, but because of the accumulation. The grade steepens as you climb. The road is rougher. The oxen slow. Every mile takes longer than the last. You eat your meals without ceremony, the same food in the same quantities. Beans and cornmeal and bacon in whatever combination produces the most caloric value per pound consumed, and you wash the pot and load the wagon and move. On the 6th of October, it snows. Not heavily. A few hours in the morning, small dry flakes that melt before they reach the ground in most places. that dust the upper branches of the firs and are gone by noon. Your father watches it with an expression that is not quite fear and not quite recognition. Your mother comes to stand beside him, and he puts his arm around her shoulders, which he does not often do in front of others. James catches snowflakes on his palm with the pleasure of a boy who has not yet fully absorbed what snow at this altitude in October means. You watch him do this. You let him. William is well. He has been well since the Humboldt, more or less. The cough present but not worsening. His appetite better. He walks beside the wagon more often now and asks questions about the mountains. What are the big trees called? How high is the pass? What is on the other side? California, you tell him. Green valleys, rain. He has heard this before, many times, from your parents and from you and from every adult who has repeated the phrase that kept them moving, when moving was the last thing they wanted to do. But at 9 years old, delivered by his older sister in the middle of a mountain forest with snowflakes in the air, it lands differently for him, and he looks at you with an expression of such complete and open trust that you have to look away, back at the road ahead, back at the oxen, back at the distance still to be covered. On the 12th of October, James Reed kills a man. This fact sits in your ledger, written not in the column of provisions or miles or weather, but in the margin of the page for that date, in smaller writing than your usual hand, as if you could contain it by writing it small. His name is John Snyder. He is a teamster for the Graves family, young, perhaps 25, well-liked among the younger men of the party. The argument begins over the way to manage a difficult section of road where two wagons have become tangled, Reed's and Snyder's. The argument escalates. Snyder strikes Reed with his whip handle more than once. Reed draws a knife and stabs Snyder once, and Snyder dies within the hour. You do not see this. You are at the rear of the column, and you hear the shouting, and then later the silence, and then the news moves back through the party in the way that bad news moves, quickly and incompletely. You go forward to see what has happened, and come close enough to see Snyder on the ground, and to see Reed standing apart from the group, with his family around him, and the look on his face, not the look of a man who regrets, but the look of a man who has done something and is waiting to see what it costs him. The party votes that night to exile Reed from the wagon train. He is sent ahead on horseback, without his wagon, without his family, with the understanding that he will seek help from the California settlements and send it back. His wife and children and mother-in-law continue with the party, their wagon now driven by a hired man. This means the wagon train has lost its most forceful leader. It means the Reed family, already reduced in oxen, is now also reduced in adult male labor. And it means something else that you think about but do not write down, that the social fabric of this party, which has been under strain since Fort Bridger, has now torn. The tear will not be repaired. When the fabric of a party tears, the parties that were held together by it begin to act more individually, to calculate their own interests separately from the group's interests, to make decisions for their family's survival that they would not make if the whole still felt whole. You have seen smaller versions of this on the road. The gradual separation of stragglers from the column, the moment when one family's fire is too far from another family's fire to share warmth. This is a larger version. You continue up the mountain. In the weeks following Reed's exile, the party covers ground more slowly than before. partly because of the loss of his organization, partly because the terrain is steeper, partly because the oxen are at a threshold you can see in their bodies. The hip bones very pronounced now, the neck muscles thin, the way they stand in the morning with their weight shifted, resting a leg. You have 3 oxen. You need all 3. The weather is cold now, cold at all hours. You sleep in your clothes. You sleep in your coat. William sleeps between you and your mother for warmth, a practical arrangement that has become the standard. James sleeps with the blankets pulled entirely over his head, a habit from the Illinois winters that serves him well here. Your breath fogs in the morning inside the wagon. You watch the sky with an attention you have not had before, reading it the way you have seen the older men read it, the color of the horizon at sunset, the behavior of clouds building over the western peaks, the direction of wind through the high firs. You do not know what you are looking for exactly, but you are looking. On the 23rd of October, you reach the camp below Truckee Pass. The pass is at approximately 7,200 feet. You are at perhaps 6,500 feet. The climb from here to the pass is the final steep section, a rise of 700 feet over roughly 3 miles, through increasingly sparse forest and then open rock. You can see the top. On a clear day, which this is, you can see the ridgeline of the pass, a notch in the mountain skyline where the slope drops away on the other side. Beyond that ridge is the descent into California. Beyond that ridge is the Sacramento Valley. It is close enough that you can see it. The snow that fell lightly in early October has melted from the lower slopes. The pass itself shows no snow on its south-facing faces, though the northern exposures are white. The men study it. Some believe it is still clear, some are less certain. Your father looks at it for a long time. You look at your ledger, you look at the date, you look at your father. 3 oxen, October 23rd. The pass is visible. We go in the morning, you say. Your father looks at you. He is not surprised. He has learned over these months that when you say something, it is the result of a calculation you have already finished. In the morning, he agrees. The camp settles, fires are built, food is cooked. The diminished rations that you have been managing down slowly, carefully, the way you manage everything, not all at once, but in small reductions that the body adjusts to without fully registering. William asks you, before he sleeps, if California is warm. You tell him yes. You tell him there are valleys with grass and rivers that run all year, and the winters are mild. You tell him there are orange trees. You have read this in the pamphlets your father brought home in the winter, the pamphlets that started all of this. He closes his eyes. Your mother arranges the blankets around him and then looks at you across his sleeping form. And in the look is everything that does not get said, the months behind you and the miles and the rocking chair by the side of the Humboldt Road and the ox named Duke and the cold and the cold and the arithmetic that never quite balances. All of it in one look between the two of you over the sleeping child. Then she lies down. You go to the back of the wagon and sit on the tailgate with your ledger in your lap. The pass is still visible in the moonlight, the notch in the ridge, the pale rock at the summit. The pines around the camp make small sounds in the night wind. The oxen stand at their tether, very still. Tomorrow you climb. It is the 23rd of October, 1846. You close your ledger. You listen to the mountain breathe. The days after Reed's exile have a different shape. Reed's presence in the party, whatever its complications, was organizational. He drove decisions forward. He set pace. He was the man other men turned to even when they did not like him. Without that center, the party moves more by consensus, which is slower, and by individual calculation, which is more fractured. You feel this in the small decisions: where to camp, how long to noon, whether to push through a difficult section or detour around it. These were decisions that previously had a force behind them, and now have discussion. Discussion takes time. Time is the thing you have least of. Your father does not try to fill Reed's role. He is not that kind of man. He does his work, drives his wagon, keeps his family fed and moving, and leaves the larger organizational questions to the men who want to manage them. You have your own view of this, which is that the largest organizational question is a simple one: move faster. Everything else is secondary to that. You try to communicate this to your father without undermining the patience he needs to maintain. We should move before the others are ready in the morning, you say one evening. We do not need to wait for the full party. He considers this. Safer in numbers, he says. Safer with food, you say. He looks at you for a moment, then he nods. The following mornings, your family is hitched and moving before most of the party has finished breakfast. Not dramatically so, not in a way that signals separation, just earlier. 30 minutes earlier, which is half a mile at your pace, which is 4 miles in 8 days. 4 miles matters. The Sierra Nevada closes in from the west as October progresses. The range is not a single ridge, but a complex of ridges and canyons that rise steeply from the eastern Nevada desert. And as you approach it over the final week of travel from the Truckee River's lower reaches, the scale of it becomes comprehensible in a way that distance did not permit earlier. It is enormous. You have seen mountains on this journey: the Rockies, the Wasatch, the ranges of the Nevada Basin, but the Sierra Nevada has a different scale, a steepness that the Rockies do not have, a concentration of mass that makes the range look, from the desert approaching it, less like a mountain range and more like a wall. California is on the other side of that wall. You think about California sometimes in a specific and practical way, not the pamphlet California of green valleys and mild winters, but the practical California of the settlements, the ranches and small farms along the Sacramento River Valley, the places where people have been living who crossed this same mountain and came down the other side. There are people there who did what you are doing and succeeded. This is not an abstraction. This is a verifiable historical fact. People have crossed the Sierra Nevada with wagons and reached California alive. You hold this fact precisely, without embellishment, when the other facts are harder to hold. The party reaches the Truckee River's upper canyon in the 3rd week of October. The river here runs through a deep granite gorge, the walls rising sheer on both sides. The road a narrow shelf cut along the canyon wall above the water. The road crosses the river multiple times in this section, each ford manageable but requiring attention. The water fast and cold. The grade in the upper canyon is the steepest you have encountered. The oxen strain visibly on the pitches where the road rises most sharply. You can hear Limper's uneven breathing above the river sound. The other two pull without complaint, which is the fundamental character of oxen, a tolerance for suffering that asks for nothing in return except the occasional rest and the continued presence of work. You watch them and note what you see. James walks the steepest sections ahead of the team, coaxing them forward by voice and by touch, a relationship he has been building since Missouri. He is good with animals in a way that is separate from training, an instinct for what they need in a given moment, the difference between encouragement and demand. You have watched him with the oxen over 5 months, and you think, sometimes, that if the road has given your family anything, it has given James a competence he would not have found in Illinois for another 10 years. You note this thought and do not share it. James does not need to be told he is growing up. He is just doing it, the way people do on this road, out of necessity, without ceremony. The camp below Truckee Pass arrives on the 23rd of October. You make camp in the afternoon, earlier than usual, because the pass is visible from this position, and your father wants time to assess it before committing to the approach. You are at approximately 6,500 feet. The pass is at approximately 7,200, which means 700 feet of elevation gain over roughly 3 miles of road. You can see the summit. On a clear afternoon, which this is, the notch in the ridge is visible, the gap where the road crosses the divide and California begins. The rock at the summit is pale granite, the snow on the northern faces bright white, the sky above it the hard blue of high altitude in October. It is close enough to see. Close enough to see is not the same as close enough to reach. But it is something. It is the knowledge that the thing is real and the thing is there, and the distance remaining is a distance that can be covered by the bodies you have. You sit outside the wagon in the late afternoon light and open your ledger to the current page. October 23rd, 1846. Below Truckee Pass. Elevation approximately 6,500 feet. Distance to summit, estimated 3 miles, 3 oxen, current condition holding, 5 people. Flour, 167 pounds. Beans, 12 pounds. Bacon, 38 pounds. Hardtack, 29 pounds. Cornmeal, 14 pounds. You write this carefully. You read it back. Then you close the ledger and look up at the pass. Tomorrow morning you will start the final climb. You have come too far to stop below the summit. That is not a calculation, that is simply true. You put the ledger back in your coat and watch the light change on the mountain above you as the sun drops, the summit going from bright to shadow, the sky above it deepening from blue to the first suggestion of evening. The fire needs building. You get up and do it. You wake before dawn to the sound of wind. Not the small night wind that had been moving through the pines. This is a different sound, a deeper register, a sound that seems to come from above the tree line where the mountain is open to the sky. You lie still and listen to it for a moment, with your eyes open in the dark of the wagon. Then you get up. The cold when you push back the canvas is a different cold from any you have felt on this journey. It is the cold of high altitude, thin air, wind that has come a long way across open ground without anything to slow it. You pull your coat around you and climb down. The fire from last night is cold ash. The sky is still dark, the stars fading at the eastern edge where dawn is beginning its slow work. The pines are moving, not in the lazy way of a summer breeze, but in long arcs, the whole tree bending and recovering, bending and recovering. The pass above you is not visible. In the dark you cannot see the ridge line, but what you can see is that the sky in the west, above where the pass should be, is a different kind of dark than the sky to the east. It is the dark of cloud, thick and uniform, the kind of sky that does not have a bottom. You stand at the edge of the camp and look at it. Your father comes out of the wagon behind you. He stands beside you in the dark and looks at the same sky. Neither of you speaks for a moment. Then he says, "How long do we have?" You do not know. You have been watching weather for 6 months on the trail, but this is Sierra Nevada weather at the end of October, which is a different thing from the thunderstorms of the Platte River or the dry cold of the desert nights. You do not know this weather. "We go now," you say. "We go before it arrives." The camp is up within the hour. You do not cook a full breakfast. You heat water, make coffee, give William a biscuit and a strip of bacon, and begin hitching the oxen in the near dark with hands that are numb at the fingertips before you have finished. James works the harness beside you. He has learned over 5 months to do this work without instruction, the same way all of you have learned the things you needed to learn, by necessity, by repetition, by the simple fact that there was no one else to do it. Limper is stiff in the cold. You watch him as he is hitched. He moves, he takes his place in the team. He responds to the commands, but his movement has a quality of effort that the other two do not have. A hesitation at each step that you know means pain he is working through, not pain he has recovered from. You say nothing. There is nothing to say. The party sets out in the gray pre-dawn. 20 wagons moving in a ragged column up the road that rises from the camp toward the pass. The road here is a series of switchbacks cut into the mountain face, steep enough that the wagons must be taken one at a time in places, each one winched up while the others wait. The system works. It is slow, but it works. You reach the first switchback at full dawn, and the light, when it comes, shows you the sky clearly for the first time. The clouds are building from the west with the kind of speed that leaves no ambiguity about intent. They are high and gray-white, the leading edge already spreading across the western quarter of the sky. And below them the air has the stillness before a major weather system. The wind dropping, the sound of the forest going quiet in a way that is not peaceful but preparatory. You look at the clouds, and then you look at the pass, and you do your calculation. The pass is perhaps 2 miles away horizontally and 700 feet above your current position. At the pace you are moving, with the switchbacks and the winching and the animals at the limits of their strength, you are perhaps 4 to 5 hours from the summit. 4 to 5 hours is a long time to look at those clouds. You keep moving. The grade above the first switchback is the steepest of the journey. The road is a narrow cut through rock and pine root, just wide enough for a wagon, rising at an angle that puts the lead oxen's shoulders below the level of the wagon bed. The oxen lean into their yokes. You can hear them breathe. Your father drives. You and James walk behind, ready to block the wheels with rocks if an animal stumbles and the wagon begins to slide back. This is called chalking, and you have done it many times on difficult grades. But on this grade, the consequence of a wagon sliding back is a different order of problem from anything you have encountered before. You watch the wheels and watch the oxen and watch the sky. Limper stumbles on the second steep section. He catches himself, steps back into the yoke, keeps going, but the stumble costs the team half a step of forward progress, and you see your father take up the slack in the lines with the quick expertise of someone who has been managing this team for months. "Hup," he says to them, "hup." And they go. The furs thin as you climb, and the rock comes through the surface of the road, and then the road becomes a series of rock shelves, not a road at all in the usual sense, a route across natural granite terracing that the wagons must be lifted over one at a time, with the combined chains and ropes of multiple teams. The wind comes back at the third switchback. It comes from the west, cold and with a quality of moisture that you can feel in your throat, a wet cold, and the sky to the west has closed entirely now, no blue visible, the cloud layer thick from horizon to the mountains and moving. Your breath comes in white puffs that the wind takes immediately. The party works in near silence. There is not energy for conversation. There is not energy for anything beyond the immediate task of the next section of road, the next boulder, the next winching point. The sound of the mountain is chains, and the creak of wagon wood, and the breathing of people and animals working at their limits. Then the snow begins. Not lightly, not the dry dusting of early October. This snow is dense and driven, small flakes packed together by wind, and it arrives all at once, a curtain that drops and turns the world gray-white in seconds. You can see perhaps 50 yards ahead of you. The road above, the pass, the ridge, all of it disappears into white. You hear shouting from somewhere in the column, voices making decisions. Your father's voice among them calling something back, and then his hand on your arm. "Wagon," he says. He means get to the wagon. You understand what he is telling you. If this snow is serious, and it has already announced that it is serious, the wagons that have not yet reached the pass need to find shelter. The wagons that are above you are either already over or they are not, and either way there is nothing you can do about them. What you can do is secure your family and your food and your animals in a position from which you can make the next decision. You and James take the wheel chocks. Your father reverses the wagon back to a level section of road just below the third switchback. A shelf of rock perhaps 30 feet wide with a pine stand on the uphill side that breaks the worst of the wind. You pull the canvas tight. You hobble the oxen to the pine trunks. Then you sit inside the wagon and listen to the snow. It comes down through the afternoon and into the evening without pausing. The canvas takes the weight of it and must be pushed from inside periodically to prevent accumulation. Outside, through the gap where the canvas meets the wagon bow, you can see the snow piling against the pine trunks and building on the rocks and turning the world the single color of itself. William has the cough again. The cold brought it back. He sits against your mother, and she has her arm around him, and they are both under the heavy wool blanket, and you can see by the set of your mother's jaw that she is performing a practiced version of not being frightened. Your father checks the oxen twice in the afternoon. He comes back covered in snow each time, brushing it from his shoulders, not saying much. The oxen are standing. They are enduring. Oxen endure things that seem impossible to endure. This is perhaps the most reliable fact you have discovered on this journey. The snow stops in the night. You wake to the silence of it, the quiet that accumulates when snow has been falling and then ceases, the world holding its new weight, the sound of the trees reduced to the occasional release of a snow-laden branch. You push out of the wagon before dawn. The world is white, 3 feet of snow on the flat, deeper where it drifted against rock and pine, and the road above, the switchbacks, the route to the pass, is entirely covered. Not covered the way a light snow covers a road, with the road still visible beneath. Covered the way the road is gone. You stand in the snow up to your knees and look up toward where the pass should be. In the early light you can see the ridge again, the clouds have cleared, and the snow on the summit is brilliant against the cold blue sky. The pass is there. It is perhaps 1.5 miles above you. It is also buried. The men confer at a fire that is built with difficulty in the wet world of the morning. The conversation is practical, stripped of argument. The snow is too deep to move wagons through. The animals are exhausted. No one has sufficient food to wait through the winter in the Sierra, though no one says this part aloud. The decision, when it comes, is the decision you expected. You abandon the wagons here. The food that can be carried is divided among the people who can carry it. Everything else stays. You watch your family's wagon disassembled of its useful contents with the same methodical attention you have given to everything else on this journey. The flour that remains, 112 pounds of it, is divided into parcels. The bacon, the dried beans, the hardtack. Your ledger goes in your coat pocket. Your mother stands beside the wagon for a moment, the wagon that carried your family's life from Illinois. The rocker chair is already gone, left beside the Humboldt. The extra tools, the books, most of them, the fabric for the curtains, and now the wagon itself, left on a shelf of rock below a pass that has closed around you. She touches the side of the wagon once. Then she turns away and lifts her pack. You walk. The party on foot moves differently from the party in wagons. It is, in some ways, more direct. You are not managing animals or road conditions or wheel clearance. You are walking, the most basic form of movement, one foot and then the other. And the mathematics of it are simpler than anything you have calculated in months. How many miles can you walk in a day? How many calories do you burn walking through snow at altitude? How many days of food do you carry? The snow on the road to the pass is deep. You sink to your knee with each step and must lift your foot clear and step again, which is not walking in the usual sense, but a form of controlled falling forward, using energy at 2 to 3 times the rate of normal walking. James breaks trail when he can. He is the tallest now, and your father follows, and you follow, and your mother with William comes behind. Limper walks with you. You have kept him. The other 2 oxen were too exhausted to make the climb and were left with the wagon. But Limper, who has been favoring his leg since the Platte River, and who has been your concern and your accounting entry since July, walks beside you in the snow with a steadiness that surprises you. He carries a partial load of the food lashed to his back in the way mountain packers do it, balanced and secured. He is a remarkably stubborn animal. The pass comes closer with each hour. The climbing in deep snow at 7,000 feet is the hardest physical thing you have done in your life. Your lungs work harder than they should for the effort, the altitude thinning the air to a point where you are aware of breathing in a way you never are at lower elevations. Your legs burn. Your shoulders burn from the pack. But you are moving. By midday, you are within 500 yards of the summit. You can see the actual pass now, the gap in the ridge, the place where the mountain stops going up and starts going down. Beyond it, not visible yet, is the descent. The western slope, California. You stop to rest at a boulder that breaks the wind. William sits beside you. His breathing is fast from the altitude and the exertion, but his color is better than it was in the wagon, the cold air having some quality that quiets his cough where the wagon's enclosed air did not. He leans against your shoulder, and you let him, the two of you sitting against the boulder with the snow stretching in every direction. "Is it much farther?" he asks. "You can see the pass from here. You can see the top." "No," you say, "not much farther." He nods and leans against you a little more. Your father stands ahead, looking up, calculating. Your mother is behind, coming steadily. James has already pushed ahead to the next rock, impatient, 14 years old, and indefatigable in the way of people who do not yet understand that the body has limits. You will reach the summit today. You know this the way you know the things in your ledger, with the certainty of a number that has been checked twice. You stand, you adjust your pack. You reach down, and William takes your hand, which he has not done since he was much younger, and you hold it, and you start climbing again. The snow is hard-packed at the summit, blown clear in places by the wind, and the last 100 yards are easier than the section below. The pass is a narrow gap of rock with the world falling away on both sides, east and west, and when you step through it, you are standing in the wind with both sides of the Sierra visible at once. To the east, the desert you came from, the Truckee River Valley far below, the Nevada Basin beyond it, the salt flats invisible in the distance but present in your body's memory of crossing them. The road you walked, all of it, every mile of it, back to the horizon. To the west, green. It is not the lush green of the pamphlets, not yet, not from this altitude. What you see is the dark green of pine forest descending steeply on the western slope, and below the forest, the brown gold of foothill grass, and below that, at the edge of visibility, a quality of light that is different from the mountain light, a softness, a moisture in the air that the desert side does not have. California is not a valley yet from here. It is a direction. It is a change in the quality of the light. But it is there. Your father comes through the pass and stands beside you. Then James. Then your mother, who has to help William with the last steep section, the two of them coming through together. They stand beside you and look west. Nobody speaks. The wind at the pass is cold and constant. The sky is blue and enormous. The mountain drops away below you in both directions. You have covered approximately 2,000 miles since Independence, Missouri. You have been on the road since May. You have used 460 pounds of flour, most of a barrel of bacon, 60 pounds of cornmeal, all of your dried fruit, most of your coffee. You have left behind a rocking chair, and a chest of books, and a set of tools, and 2 bolts of fabric, and an ox named Duke, and a wagon that your father built in Illinois the winter before last. You have 4 more weeks of food. The settlements of California are 2 to 3 weeks of walking on the western slope through easier country downhill. You have made it. You do not say this. You do not have to. Your family stands at the top of the Sierra Nevada in the October wind, and for a moment, nobody moves, nobody calculates, nobody writes anything in any ledger. You look west. Then you start down. The western slope of the Sierra is a different world from the eastern face. The descent is steep, but the snow is thinner. The sun reaches these south-facing slopes more directly, and within 2 hours of the summit you are walking through forest in conditions that feel almost manageable after everything above. The temperature is warmer. The trees are different, denser, the forest floor softer underfoot. Limper walks beside you steadily. His leg holds on the downhill as it held on the uphill. You have never decided whether to think of him as unlucky or fortunate, a limping ox who crossed the continent and then crossed the mountains, and you decide now that fortunate is the more accurate word. The camp that night is at a creek below the snow line. You make a fire with dry wood that you do not have to chip from frozen ground. The smoke goes straight up in the still air. Your mother cooks beans and bacon in the same cast iron skillet she carried from Illinois, the one she wrapped in the wedding quilt, which is still in the pack on your back. And the smell of the food in the forest is the smell of a kitchen, the smell of something that has been waiting a long time to exist. William eats 2 bowls. He holds the tin bowl with both hands and eats with complete attention, the way children eat when they are truly hungry and something is truly good, and you watch this for a moment before you eat your own. Your father says a quiet grace, which he does each evening but which tonight is slightly longer than usual, and then he eats too. The fire burns. The creek makes its sound. The forest holds its breath. You open your ledger to the last page with writing, and below the final entry you write the date and a number. Miles remaining to Sacramento Valley settlements, approximate, based on the best information you have. 60 miles. Then you close the ledger. It is October 24th, 1846. In 3 weeks, the second major snowstorm of the season will close Truckee Pass completely and will not open it again until spring. The Donner Party, the families who are still behind you in the mountains, the families you camped beside and shared fires with and argued and traveled with for these months, will be trapped on the eastern side of the mountains through the winter. You do not know this. You know that there is a fire in front of you and a creek beside you and 60 miles of downhill between you and a valley. You lie back on your pack and look up through the pine canopy at the stars. They are the same stars you saw at Fort Bridger, at the Humboldt, at the Truckee River in the desert. The same stars from every camp since Missouri. They were there when your father said we go with the Donners in the morning, and they were there when you lay awake calculating flour, and they were there above the salt desert and above the mountains, and they are here above this creek on the western side of the Sierra Nevada. They do not know anything about routes or distances or ledgers. They are simply there. Your mother is already asleep beside you, her breathing slow. Your father's fire-watching posture has softened into sleep. James is on his back with his arms over his head. William is curled against your mother's side. The fire settles. The creek runs over its stones, the same sound it will make all night, the same sound it made before you arrived, and will make after you are gone, indifferent and clear and cold and continuous. You are very tired. Not the tired of a single hard day, the tired of 5 months, of every morning you rose before the camp and opened your ledger and began the day's accounting. Every mile, every ounce of flour, every decision that was yours to make and the ones that were not yours to make, but that you made anyway, quietly, in the figures. The mountains are behind you now. You look up at the stars for a little while longer. Then your eyes close. The fire is low. The creek runs. The pines are still. The world is very quiet. You have come a long way. You rest. If this story stayed with you tonight, a subscribe to Quiet History at Bedtime means everything right now, and it keeps stories like this one coming. And if you found this alongside our other episodes, take a look at the channel. There are more journeys waiting there, other hands and other roads, other nights like this one, quiet and slow and full of history. Like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you do not miss the next one. Sleep well. Good night.